Thank you. Okay. Welcome to this Planning Committee meeting of South Oxfordshire District Council. I'm Councillor David Brotherton and I'll be chairing this meeting. May I remind everyone that this is a meeting in public. It is not a public meeting. Only members of the public who are registered to speak are allowed to do so, and I will call them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held in our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting has been streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. The system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room and hear the whole debate are allowed to vote. For speakers and other members of the public who have logged on remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is turned off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. If you share a presentation on screen, please make sure that you stop sharing this when it is no longer needed. It's gone. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that the set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each application. We'll first hear from the Planning Officer, followed by the Parish or Town Council, then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members of the committee may ask questions of the group. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the Planning Officer. The committee will then debate and vote on each application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by letting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hands clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I will ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. A few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediate to the right of this meeting room, and then go to Assembly Point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer, who is present, will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Councillors and speakers in the room, please be aware that the cameras and microphones are live for the duration of the meeting and will pick up most things that I said. Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been debated are welcome to do so by the route previously mentioned. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for confirmation that our live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. Right, back to the agenda. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence were received from Councillors Axel MacDonald, Joe Robb, who is substituted for Councillor James Norman, Peter Dragonetti, who is substituted for Councillor James Barlow, and Tim Bearder.
Thank you. Minutes of previous meeting. To adopt and sign as a record the Planning Committee Planning Committee minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of May 2024. They would agree to that. Yeah, thank you. Those are nods. Good.
Proposer Darius.
Yeah, proposer. Seconder. Yeah, thank you. All in favour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good man. Declaration of interest. Receive declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests, and non-registrable interests of any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. I see none. Urgent business. Receive notification of any urgent business?
There's none, Chair.
There is no urgent business. Okay, we'll move on to the public participation and to the planning applications. So the first application we have is P23 S0582 at Sapwell, and the planning officer is Mark Pullen. Mark, could you take us through the application, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank those who were able to come to the site visit on Monday. I hope this was informative. This application seeks full planning permission for landscaping works on the site to include the formation of a new access on Witheridge Road, Witheridge Hill Road and the creation of a driveway which would go from the access through the site to link up to Stackwell House. It is proposed to create a lake to the centre of the site over which a newly created driveway would pass over by way of a new bridge. The key issues of concern have been raised within the report before you. These relate principally to the visual impacts of the proposed development, both in general and visual changes along Witheridge Hill Road and the ecological impacts of the proposed development. All concerns have been addressed in detail within the report before you. Officers identified that the proposed development would result in some visual impact along Witheridge Hill Road. However, this visual impact would not be detrimental or out of keeping. The proposed new access would contribute to a number of other accesses off Witheridge Hill, which are experienced in the locality of this proposed development. The design and size would not be detrimental to the character of the semi-rural residential area. The access would be straddled either side by new hedging to form a crescent, which would celebrate the new access point. The loss of the hedgerow would result in temporary visual impact on the street scene, but over time will re-establish using an appropriate mix of species which the council considers acceptable. It is officers' opinion that the proposed development would not result in adverse harm to the character or appearance of the area, and that the development would conserve and enhance the scenic and landscape qualities of this part of the Children's National Landscape. The proposed development would result in impacts to known ecological constraints on site. Most of these can be appropriately mitigated when officers are satisfied with the measures proposed to mitigate them. The main ecological issues relate to the loss of the priority habitat, the hedgerow along Witheridge Hill Road, and the tree belt in the middle of the site. The loss of priority habitat in this incident has not been appropriately justified in officers' opinion, and the proposed development would therefore, in part, fail policy. However, in support of the development is a significant level of biodiversity net gain that would be delivered on site as a result of the development. Officers acknowledge the benefit and would attribute significant weight to it. The report before you goes into detail on all other material considerations, and I do not wish to repeat them at this time to save time. Planning conditions are recommended within the report, and the full wording of these conditions can be read in Appendix C of the report. Should planning permission be granted this evening, officers would like to add an additional planning condition which would control external lighting. If external lighting is to be proposed, it would need to be submitted as part of the scheme that is first agreed by the council. This will enable control over any impact on the area and to ecology. To conclude this presentation, I will read out the planning balance and conclusion part of the report before you. The proposed development would result in some harm to the character and appearance of the Witheridge Hill Road with the introduction of a new access. It is officers' opinion that this harm would not be adverse though. The impact on ecology is noted, and this application does fail to adhere fully to the policy. However, in favour of the development is the biodiversity net gain that would be provided across the site. The proposed development would result in an enhancement of the existing vegetation and ecology on the site and would ensure appropriate drainage and flood risk measures. The proposed development is not considered to be harmful to highway safety or the amenity of neighbouring uses. All material planning considerations have been considered, and when balancing all matters, officers consider that the application can be supported and that in conjunction with the recommended conditions, the proposal accords with the development plan as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we'll move on to our speakers this evening, and the first one is Councillor Richard de Vere Stackpole. I saw a while ago.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Good evening.
You have your 5 minutes starting as soon as you speak.
Thank you very much. Richard Stackpole, Highmore Parish Council. Even with any amendments, Highmore Parish Council and our residents are concerned at the loss of this length of hedgerow, which is an integral part of the setting and landscape of Witheridge Hill Common. The elaborate gate design and proposed consequent lighting will probably more along the drive, would be an intrusion into the rural setting. We have a policy to protect dark skies and resist any unnecessary lighting. Local plan policies ENV 1 and 2 generally cover our objections. 1, the highest level of protection will be given to the landscape and scenic beauty of the Chilterns. 2, landscape, countryside and rural areas will be protected against harmful development. Development will only be permitted where it protects and, where possible, enhances features that contribute to the nature and quality of South Oxfordshire's landscapes. The planning officer's report to you barely mentions that we lie in the centre of the AONB in South Oxon, and then goes on to dismiss any consequences for the landscape in 2 very controversial paragraphs, which you have before you, 7.4 and 7.5. We wonder if there has even been a full visit by the officers to the site. It is still described as being in Satwell. It's in Witheridge Hill. SODC is under an obligation to protect what is now the Chilterns National Landscape. Within ENV2, policy that there needs to be imperative reason of overriding public interest for the development to proceed. What is the public interest? The site of the new entrance is clearly visible from Witheridge Hill Common and 2 well-used public footpaths. Also, of course, from the road and from the properties opposite on Witheridge Hill. How do you mitigate for the loss of a historic hedgerow and open field, which are important elements of our landscape? In response, the proposal is for the planting of many extra trees, but this in an area that is already heavily wooded, where that pleasant pastured field with public footpath 19 sloping down to iconic Chiltern woodland would be forever spoiled. The loss of the hedgerow and the open aspect of the fields through which the drive will cut is not sufficiently addressed. 2, there are no feasible alternative solutions to the development that are less damaging. We have seen few references to possible alternatives. This holding already has 3 or 4 accesses directly from the main road. The original entrance by Satwell Farm, a new drive with gates along a lighted avenue of trees, and another newer field entrance next to the recreation ground. An alternative position for the entrance to this holding would quite simply be on the B481 at that position near the recreation ground. This is open, level ground, which would actually benefit from extra tree planting, allowing the drive to wind through the area proposed for ponds and so to the house. We feel sure this access could be enlarged to make a safe entrance. This would have no consequences for neighbouring properties. We don't think there would be any environmental issues apart from the loss and replacement of a few conifer trees. The existing gateway could even be moved here with no issue. And 3, that the proposal will not be detrimental to the maintenance of the populations of species concerned at a favourable conservation status in their natural range. During the environmental examination, about the only place where dormice were found to be nesting is right in the middle of the length of hedge to be grobbed out. A new hedge would take years to attract dormice again and will always have a large break in it, which will sever the continuity of movement along the hedgerow. Mitigation measures suggested all seem focused on the planting of additional trees, which would not necessarily enhance the landscape. Trees planted along the line of the drive may not
30 seconds remaining.
Add sufficiently to the ecological benefit of the area, as they will likely be kept clear of any undergrowth. I would conclude by saying that we do not feel that a case has been made for overriding planning policies meant to protect our landscape, and that this application thus be refused, or at least, well, no, that's okay. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sackville. Can I point out that we're here to discuss the existing application and not to redesign it and reallocate it. Right, committee, has anyone got any questions? No, I see none. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation. And we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Belinda Swan. Yep, just here. Could you take the table, please, over there?
Good evening.
Thank you. And you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of Peter Allport, who lives with his wife, Annie, in Witheridge Hill, and they have been for the last 20 years. They own more than 5 acres of Witheridge Hill Common, which has been managed by the Nettlebed and District Commons Conservators. He became a conservator responsible for all 23 acres of Witheridge Hill Common 18 years ago and is still responsible for it. I hope the committee members have received and read the following representations. One being a hedge versus a vanity project submitted by Peter on the 10th of May on behalf of 12 local objectors. Then secondly, Vladimir Brailovsky's memorandum submitted on the 11th of May. And then Dr. Beachy Newman's summary submitted on the 12th of May. With respect, if you haven't studied these documents, I don't see how you can justify reaching a decision to grant consent. Hopefully, if you have so, I thought it'd be helpful to summarize the following key points. Our main concern is the proposed destruction of 125 meters of ancient country hedge and the resultant loss of long-established wildlife habitat. This particular hedge is an important habitat for numerous animals such as hedgehogs, dormice, birds, and all natural hedges includes holes to allow movement of wildlife. In this case, particularly deers, badgers, frogs, and toads. The mature hedge, in some cases, is more than 6 foot thick. It's not replaceable. It will take more than 10 years to regrow to anything with the current width and density. Also, will the additional dense metal fencing be incorporated with the hedge, as is the case with the remainder of the estate, which would bar the movement of any wildlife? Number 2, the hedge is designated priority habitat under the 1997 hedgerow regulations. Number 3, policy ENV2 states there must be no reasonable alternative, as the estate already has 4 entrances, including the existing formal one, which is powerfully lit driveway leading to the house. There definitely are viable alternatives. Number 4, the recommendation to grant consent is based on a predictive biodiversity gain, outweighing the loss of the hedge and its replacement with a hedge that, according to the planning report, will take 12 years to mature. Brailovsky's expert study proves that the data provided clearly does not support the prediction and most likely points to a biodiversity loss. I quote from his cover email and his summary of the memorandum. His email: I would like to draw the committee's attention to the biodiversity study, one of the main supports of the officer's recommendation to approve the project. My conclusion is that the study in its own terms does not support such approval, as it does not reach the targets set by itself and by the current government regulations. But a deeper quantitative analysis of the study shows that meager gains are even lower and probably negative. My conclusion does not depend on my preferences, but dictated by the numbers submitted. This memorandum summarizes quantitative analysis of the biodiversity study. The officer's supporting document states that the government policy seeks to secure net gains for biodiversity and requires that applications are supported by biodiversity metric assessment. No loss of biodiversity, net loss of biodiversity will not be supported. It also states that the submitted biodiversity net gain study demonstrates a net gain of 4.75% across the whole site. That's 4.75%. This is not supported by the diversity study, and therefore the project should not be approved. The project is recommended for approval under the incorrect premise that its benefits in terms of biodiversity outweigh the costs. This note demonstrates that they do not. The biodiversity study makes a series of unsubstantiated assumptions that erroneously underestimate the costs and overstate the benefits.
You have 30 seconds.
Furthermore, one cannot compare the future benefits with the present cost without considering an important element of risk. The biodiversity study is mute in this regard. The future is eminently uncertain. The present is not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Committee, has anybody got any questions? Yes, I've got a question. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Could you tell me when the hedge was last cut?
It is probably 2 years ago,
Thank you.
probably, I would say, because I haven't seen it done over this winter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we now move on to our group of supporters. We have 3: Ken Casey, Marcus Bennett and Joseph Martin. 2 are with us in person, and the other one online. Yeah. Now, I don't know, we've got 5 minutes between you. I don't know how you're going to sort it out.
Good manage.
Someone going to take the lead?
I'll take the lead.
Yeah, okay. So you have 5 minutes for when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ken Casey. I've been working alongside the family who live at Satwell for almost a decade. The family, a mother and our 5 children, are hugely fond of their home and passionate about the landscape. Indeed, one of the compelling factors behind them choosing to live at Satwell is that it sits on alongside an area of outstanding natural beauty. Children reaching adulthood, marriages, and the arrival of grandchildren over the last couple of years means there are now 3 generations living at Satwell. For cultural reasons, the adult son and married daughters do not live with their mother. As a consequence, the family know that they need to make full use of the existing properties that lie within Satwell, but the 3 properties are very badly connected. The plan is not just to improve connectivity, but to use that work as an opportunity to radically enhance the ecology and biodiversity on the estate. The family have been thoughtful in their approach to this work. Over 2 years ago, they started a search of leading landscape architects to find the right team to deliver something beautiful while making a significant positive impact on the land. After studying various plans presented to them, they picked Marcus Barnett's studio. They felt that Marcus and his passion for the stewardship of the landscape was best placed to deliver their long-term vision for the estate. Marcus and his award-winning team have an international reputation for continuing exceptional design with lasting and sympathetic landscape enhancement. Marcus joined us this evening via Teams, and he's going to speak to you and describe the design that the family loved so much.
Thank you, Ken. As he said, my name is Marcus Barnett of Marcus Barnett Studio, and we're over 20 years old, and we've worked throughout the British countryside. In each instance, our ambition is always to enhance each and every landscape we work on. Satwell, being the name of the property, is no different. We, as a studio, are passionate about what we do, with whom we work, where we work, and crucially, how we work. We select plants and other materials with great care, and we ask questions such as, are the selected plants present and thriving in the surrounding area? Will they thrive and blend into the existing plant communities? How can the design enhance and support local wildlife and the planted environment? And most importantly, what will the environmental legacy be? Our job at Satwell House is to examine the existing landscape, its context, the ecology, and the homeowner's brief. Surveys have been commissioned, and we are working closely with specialists in relevant disciplines. In our experience, few clients take such care to ensure that the completed landscape is finished to such a level of maturity and beauty as will be the case here. Nor are they prepared to make the financial commitments necessary to achieve this. My studio is confident that the proposals presented today are of good design merit, following and involving extensive research and consultation. For example, by working with the local highways authority, the location of the entrance has been altered. In detail, to refer to the hedge, to ensure road safety for the proposed entrance, 100 linear meters of existing hedgerow will be removed and over 100 linear meters of new mature, like-for-like native hedging will be planted. And I should add, it is little known that it is possible to purchase and plant mature hedging of similar scale, but it is. A further 100 meters of similar hedging will be planted internally. Our clients are custodians of this incredible landscape. It is imperative, therefore, for them that succession planting for future generations is also included within the design. So 150 mature trees will be planted in copses and alongside paths and drives throughout the landscape. What else are we doing? A long neglected and stagnant pond will be dredged and regenerated. New marginal plants
You
will
have
be
30
set
seconds remaining.
into the pond's bank, creating new plant and insect life communities. A new lake with marginal planting on the water's edge will also be established. And finally, a series of new wildfowl meadows will be created to support and encourage existing and new wildlife and insect colonies. I hope this is an effective summary and outline of our work. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barnett. I'll reiterate that. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Norman.
For Mr. Barnett, as a presumably someone with ecological background, do you personally have any qualms about the removal of an ancient hedgerow?
I think it would be wrong for me to say that I don't examine such an undertaking with extreme caution. I'm loath to, and yes, I have an ecological background. It is, after all, what I do every day. And so, as I said, I'm careful to ensure that the legacy can be upheld and very much the same as that is temporarily removed. And I should make comment, I think, that some of the remarks made earlier this evening about a sort of 12-year delay in maturity for the hedge will simply not be the case. I would imagine that maturity will be planted almost instantaneously. The thickening of the hedge will take time. I'll concede that. But I don't have a short-term nor long-term concern about the effect of the ecology.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Councillor Gordon-Green.
For Mr. Barnett, similar lines with regards to the ancient hedgerow and its current species. Do you like there isn't a way to, you know, just because you plant new hedging that's mature doesn't mean those species are going to move to that new hedging. The reality is that they will be disturbed and they will be lost. So how do you justify that in the design of the ecology element?
When you talk about species, I presume you mean wildlife rather than plant life.
I do. I mean invertebrates, mammals, birds, etc.
So again, as was correct, a mention was made earlier about it being a corridor, and the hedgerow is exactly that. And I think it wise to say that the corridor will be affected because it is in nature being temporarily removed. The wildlife that is in the proposed length to be removed will temporarily relocate, but I absolutely guarantee, having done this a few times, not a great many times, because as I say, I'm very cautious about this undertaking, I'm very confident that the corridor will be much more swiftly reinforced and re-established than is perhaps perceived possible because of what can be done and how it can be done, and the plants that we purchase and how we plant them, because it is a responsibility that me and my studio take very seriously indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Another question, Councillor Hart?
Yes, it was discussed at the site meeting that it might be possible to lift part of the existing hedge and then replant it in the new position. I've seen this done with trees, which work very successful. So is that still a possibility?
It is. Again, if I attempt to bring past experience to bear this evening, if we take, for example, 10 linear meters of the existing hedge that is in debate this evening, if in those 10 linear meters there are, let's say, 30 plant species that leave the ground to form the 10 linear meters, if we were to lift all 10 linear meters, it is unlikely that all 30 species will survive. However, because of the depth and the capabilities now that are available to us in modern landscaping, I would estimate that, and if it's done at the right time of year, which is normally between November and March, I would estimate that 2/3, and I think this is a realistic estimation, that 2/3 of that 10 linear meters would survive. And also the ecology environments within it.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no further question. Oh, no further question, Councillor Barlow.
Again to you, Marcus. You talked about thickening of the hedge that you put in place. I just wondered what your sense was about how long in your experience that this would actually take.
So it's difficult to describe orally and not have my message confused upon receipt. Conventionally, mature hedging is planted in linear lengths in a single lane or a single line. Because of this hedge that is in question is so thick, and I think someone remarked that it was 6 foot thick, it is our ambition to re-establish a similar thickness at the end of the planting period. And having done this a great deal, if you're not familiar with this process, you will greatly question and challenge what it is that I say. But I can say it with complete assurance and confidence, and if I can say accuracy, that you can instantly plant a 6 foot hedge taller than me, and I'm 6 foot, through which you probably cannot see in the summer months. In the winter months, when the leaves are in dormancy, you may be able to see through it, but it will be instantly established as a 6 foot hedge because we will plant in multiple lines. So instead of one, we will plant in 2 or 3 or 4, and we may even plant in uneven matter and widths so that we instantly establish that natural feel and look.
Okay, thank you. Are there any?
One more.
Yeah. I think it's important. This. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. Just to go back to because I wasn't available for the site visit, but to Councillor Arlett's point, do I hear that you will undertake to transplant the hedging that is currently there as best you can, as well as new planting?
I'm wary of my response because I may make the wrong assumptions. Ultimately, there's a financial implication, and my client has to confirm that they either approve or do not that measure. I would imagine if it were a condition that you were to impose, that they would seriously consider it. I think perhaps Ken Casey could perhaps confirm that in a moment. But I think that is something that we could definitely undertake. As I say, because the reason why we plant mature trees and hedges with such success is because these mature trees and hedges are lifted every 3 years, so that when they're planted, they don't shock. And if you lift something that has never been lifted before, like the hedge in question, there is a chance that some specimens will shock and fail, which is why I gave the analogy of 30 linear meters that 2/3 would survive. I expect there'd be a third that may fail. I could be wrong. It could be 100% successful. It could be less successful. But if we do go to lift it, and if 100 linear meters are lifted and relocated, and there is plant failure within that linear meterage, then that would be supplemented by new planting, and the difference would be negligible, and I think it'd be very difficult to see it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see no further questions. Can I just pick up on that last point? How long would you propose that you need to maintain the hedge? Or would you be responsible for maintaining that hedge?
But to be clear, so that I understand your question, mean that if the hedge were to be lifted and replanted, what measures would we put in place to ensure the replanted hedge would survive? Is that your question? Sort of, yeah. And over what time period would you take responsibility for it? Would you go back in 10 years' time and say, I'm looking after it still? Or would that only be 2, 3, 4 years? Do you mean me, my studio?
Well, by your company, or well, it'll be the planning condition that it is maintained for that length of time. Okay, well, if there's a planning regulation that it be maintained for a 10-year period, then absolutely yes, it would. And in each of the projects that I work on, we always return to site throughout the year for many years to ensure that everything that we intended is exactly as it should be. And so if it were important to you that the hedge is and its survival is optimized, then absolutely we would do that, and I would do that personally. Okay. I see Mr. Casey nodding, but I think you could you comment on that, or we'll leave Mr.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of transplanting the hedge or purchasing and planting new hedges, we will do whatever gives the best outcome or the likelihood of the best outcome. That has been always the objective with this project, is to improve the biodiversity, improve the landscape, and that's the commitment. So the trees that Mark has talked about, the planting, the grassland, that is all about increasing biodiversity and improving the landscape.
Okay. Are there any further questions on this matter? I see none. So thank you very much for your presentations. We'll press on. Okay. Right. Our next speakers it's the ward councillors. Now, Mr. Norman, sorry, Councillor Norman, you could speak as the ward councillor, or reserve your moment and speak on committee.
I will speak in the debate on committee.
On committee, which is a better way, I think. The other councillor is Councillor Rob.
I'm here, Chair.
Screen.
Hello,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Good evening.
Yeah, we can hear you, and it's your moment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'm actually speaking to you live from Rewley House in Oxford, where I've exited my course that I'm studying briefly, so I can speak to you tonight, which I think tells you something about how seriously I take this application and how strongly I feel that the committee should refuse it tonight. This application is fundamentally about two problematic things. Firstly, it's about the removal of 100 metres of ancient species-rich native hedgerow, a priority habitat, and which cannot be replaced, and the introduction of a new entranceway into that particular frontage onto the road at Witheridge Hill. It also involves the introduction of an access road, bisecting two ancient fields in the Chilterns National Landscape. It's important to note that these agricultural fields are not part of the residential curtilage of any building. They are agricultural fields. So having a road will have an urbanising effect on what is currently an agricultural field in the Chilterns National Landscape. That earlier in his excellent speech. This entire site exists in the Chilterns National Landscape. We have a statutory duty under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act to conserve and enhance the character and appearance of the natural landscape. I think it's important that we think about to what extent does this scheme conserve and enhance, given that we're talking about introducing an urbanising road through the middle of what is currently an agricultural field. Those who attended the site visit on Wednesday or Tuesday would be aware of the very special beauty of this particular area, which is characterised by a patchwork of agricultural fields interspersed with swathes of ancient woodland and trimmed with ancient hedgerow. So to bisect these fields with a road access and to remove 100 metres of ancient hedgerow, replace it with new hedgerow and some, I'm sorry to say, rather naff-looking gates, completely erodes the character and appeal of the national landscape in this area. Onto ecology, the loss of 100 metres of native hedgerow is an egregious act of environmental vandalism. We must resist this. Our council has declared an ecological emergency. In our draft local plan, we are proposing a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain for all new development. We are currently in a situation where 1 in 6 species in this country is at risk of extinction. We've lost 50% of our hedgerow since World War II. It is a fundamental principle of conservation that we must preserve and conserve the habitats that we have. It will be of very little comfort, I'm sure, to the dormice and the rats and the moles and the voles and the hedgehogs and whatever else lives in that hedge, that should they escape the chainsaws and the blades of the bulldozers, they can move back in a year's time into a nice new hedge. Very little will survive. And at the moment, we're talking about a priority habitat, which we are absolutely obliged, both morally and legally, to conserve. I'm afraid that the very real harms caused by this scheme in terms of the impact on the national landscape and the loss of a priority habitat are not outweighed by the benefits of the scheme. The owners already have multiple other access points, so there is no need for this scheme insofar as there is no benefit that outweighs the harm. I will leave it to you to decide this, but I'm afraid I thank the officer for his report, but I disagree absolutely and fundamentally with his conclusions. And I can only reinforce the very deep concerns raised by the objector and by Highmore Parish Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. You were breaking up quite a bit there, but I think we got the whole essence of what you were saying. Yeah, okay. So thank you, Joe. Thank you. I'm sure you're going to stay online. Right, we go back to Mark. Have you got any questions for the officer?
Sorry, Chair, do we have any questions for the ward member?
I wasn't going to force it because of she's got anyway. She's got. Yeah. Right, we'll go back to Mark if anybody's got any questions for Mark. Sure, there's got to be some. Can
I did have one question, sorry.
Yes, Councillor Gordon-Creed.
The question of wildlife travelling through sites and fencing, I didn't see that mitigated or addressed.
Fencing, as far as I'm aware, there's no fencing proposed around the new hedge. During the construction process, we, as part of one of the conditions, condition number 5, we will be looking for details of any protective fences, include exclusion barriers or any issues during the construction process. So that would not inhibit movement across the site during the construction process.
Okay. Mark, can I ask you the same sort of question I was asking about the timescale where these hedges will be maintained, or is that condition?
So one of the conditions does enable, it does have a clause within it, condition 7, the landscape implementation. So it basically advises that the landscaping as shown in the plans should be implemented as per the plan, and in any event that the soft landscaping, which would be the hedge,
seriously damaged or destroyed within 5 years, and it will be replaced.
Confirmed, and it would have to be replaced. So that would have to be in agreement with ourselves as well.
Yeah. So there is a time scale on there.
It's 5 years. It's not 10 years, but
it's not a long time in growth terms, but it's a reasonable figure, I think. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Norman.
Mark, could I ask whether in your progress of the case, whether you investigated or asked any questions about the water supply for this proposed lake?
So the water supply, I understand, is to be achieved by boreholes, and that have been sort of stringently looked into through consultation with Thames Water themselves, through our drainage engineers, who have asked the relevant questions and have come to a strategy that we are accepting. So in terms of the details of that, I'd have to rely on the specialists for the consultees.
So could I follow up? So you mean there was a discussion with Thames Water?
So Thames Water have been consulted on the application, and they provide comments to say that they have no objections or no comments to make on the application.
Thank you.
I think to sum that up, they've not objected,
think we
but
can go any further than that.
the applicant would need a license from Thames Water to take the water.
That is correct. So
Yeah.
at the site meeting, we were told that no abstraction license existed.
Not yet.
No,
So
no,
I think they
but
said
it's
they would need to get
process.
permission first before they could do that.
Planning commission first. Yeah. Yeah. Any further questions before we move on? I've seen on, so thank you, Mark.
Can I come back on
Chair,
something?
if Mark just come back on a point that's arisen during the presentation. Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the discussion over the spading, which is the sort of taking out of the hedge and maintaining it, keeping parts of the hedge and by taking it out. I do not advise that that is considered moving forward, because it has a swathe of implications on how we've actually assessed this application. If that were to be introduced as an alternative measure, we would have to defer this to be decided tonight for us to consider that in further detail in terms of ecology and arboricultural sort of assessment. So we've considered the biodiversity impacts based on the proposal to remove the hedge and plant a new hedge. If we were to introduce that as an alternative, I don't think we can condition it. We can't just simply condition that as an alternative, because that has direct implications on how we've assessed the biodiversity net gain and how we've assessed the impact on ecology. It has such a knock-on effect that I don't think that can be addressed by a condition. So my advice to you tonight is to determine the application based on the removal of the hedge and a planted new hedge in place, rather than taking sections out of it and trying to keep it. I didn't want to get weighed down or bogged down too much into that as part of the consideration.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mark. Is that? Yeah. Are there any conditions about, when it was mentioned that these will be mature? What's the amount of maturity? I mean, that's it. So it's mature to be all sorts of things to all sorts of people. So
yes, that's true. Our conditions would cover sort of size, and we're satisfied with the species as submitted in the details of the landscaping. So we would be requiring details of planting size and density and numbers to be provided. That's condition 8. So we would consider that at a later stage. In terms of species, again, like I said, we've considered that and we're happy with the species that have been proposed for the site.
okay, I also note on there soil deposition. That's when the soil that's taken out for the lake will be must be distributed on site. So yeah.
For those who attended the visit on Monday, it was explained as to how that would be dealt with, and I think they're satisfied with that.
Okay, so we've had all our presentations. It's time for the committee to actually debate this, but we need a proposal on which to debate. Councillor Norman.
I'm going to propose that the application is rejected, and many of my points have been ably made by the contributors, but I think it's important to make them from within the committee. I hope that's acceptable. Some of this will be somewhat repetitive, but I'll be able to skip a lot of it because many of the points have been made by Councillor Stackpool, by the local resident, and by Joe Robb. This is an important and unusual application, and it faced a number of apparently insurmountable challenges. Proposes around 1,000 metres of new private roads across unspoilt and undeveloped countryside, cutting through an area of priority habitat woodland, requiring the destruction of 100 metres of superb ancient hedgerow along a lane, extensive earth moving. My calculation suggests at least 10,000 tonnes, based on figures we've been given, and remodelling of the land, creating a lake on top of a hill, and all within the Chilterns AONB, which is defined as a protected landscape. Some of the difficulties were raised by various officers and included in the report, and mostly what I'm commenting on is material from within the report. The ecology officer initially raised 10 concerns, and even after some of these were satisfied, the second set of comments included these: concerns over biodiversity metric provided. The case officer will need to be satisfied that the requirements of policy ENV23, which we will come across several times in this, are met for the loss of priority woodland and hedgerow habitats. Currently, there is inadequate compensation proposed for these impacts, as reflected by comments under the B&G metric. And that officer's third set of comments: the case officers should be happy that the requirements of policy ENV2, 3, 1 and 2 are satisfied for loss of hedgerow and woodland priority habitat. So that officer signed off with a string of as yet unsatisfied concerns. Further to this, the planning officer himself reported that, I can skip a lot of this because we've had some of it, but the ecological impact assessment confirms that the habitat is of county level importance. Under the NERC Act 2006, local plans are required to promote the conservation, restoration and enhancement of priority habitats. And our policy, South Oxfordshire Local Plan Policy ENV2(3) responds to this requirement. Approximately 57 metres of access drive is being sited through the central priority habitat woodland belt. This will require the loss of trees, result in loss of understory and introduce greater levels of disturbance, impacting the ecological value of the priority habitat. Sorry, unless I otherwise say, I am quoting from the report. And this continues. Policy ENV2 requires the development to demonstrate need/benefit which outweighs the ecological harm. It also needs to demonstrate there are no reasonable alternatives and that measures can be secured to mitigate and compensate for the harm. That is actually category 3 of that set. The first two have to be satisfied. While the proposals include scattered tree planting and perennial woodland planting, there is no comparable woodland planting to compensate for the loss of on-site woodland habitat. Officers are not convinced that the need or benefit for the development has been properly demonstrated. That is in the report. Western hedgerow, this is more or less the same. It says that there is a general, it is likely important under the hedgerow regulations. That is absolutely clear. That basically includes all hedgerows. And this one is pretty much right up there at the very top of hedgerow importance. This means the hedgerows cannot be removed without the consent of the planning authority. There is a general presumption against the loss of important hedgerows. These hedgerows are also priority habitats. Similar to the priority habitat woodland impacts discussed above, ENV2 is engaged and the requirements of this policy must all be met for the development to be judged acceptable. Plans and metric assessment, and this is all quoting, demonstrate a net gain of new hedgerow planting proposed, some 9%. However, similar to the above, officers are not satisfied that the need or benefit of the proposed development has been demonstrated to outweigh the loss of this priority habitat. And finally, on ecology, this is 719. Ecology conclusions. The loss of priority habitat would conflict with the policy ENV2(3), as the need for the loss has not been properly addressed. This weighs against the granting of planning permission. And I'm going to stress here that these are not interim findings, they're in the officer's final report. I'm now going to just mention landscape character. There is quite a lot in the report about the landscape character area 10 and the subtypes type 16 and 23. There's no need to go over that, but they are both characterized as generally rural and unspoilt character. Those of us who attended the site visit can confirm that it is indeed a very rural and unspoilt landscape. Guidelines for character area 10 include, among other things, strengthening the field pattern by conserving hedges and maintaining hedgerows at a height and width appropriate to the landscape type. However, the application had a higher hurdle than that to clear, not mentioned, as far as I can see in the officer's report, is local planned policy ENV1, although Councillor Robb did draw attention to it, or one of the other contributors. Landscape and countryside. This states, the very first paragraph, The highest level of protection will be given to the landscape and scenic beauty of the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty, now a national landscape. Development in an AONB or affecting the setting of an AONB will only be permitted where it conserves and where possible enhances the character and natural beauty of the AONB. And second to that, although it hardly needs emphasising, is a separate part which says South Oxfordshire's landscape, countryside and rural areas will be protected against harmful development. Development will only be permitted where it protects and where possible enhances features that contribute to the nature and quality of South Oxfordshire's landscapes, in particular, 1, trees, hedgerows, and field boundaries. Despite these numerous barriers, the officer concludes this report with all material planning considerations have been considered, and when balancing all matters, officers consider that the application can be supported, and in conjunction with the recommended conditions, the proposal accords with the development plan as a whole. How has this, in my view, remarkable conclusion been achieved? I will look at the justifications in turn and comment where I think there are material errors or omissions, or where in matters of judgment I feel that insufficient weight has been given to the policies in place. Landscape. The report simply states that in consultation with the Council's landscape officer, the proposed development is not considered to be detrimental to the landscape character area and the guidelines outlined above. In my view, this cannot be right. Does the application seek to conserve and enhance the natural beauty of the AONB? No, it seeks to change it by putting a new road through it, removing a historic hedge, constructing a new grand entrance using hard building materials, creating a bunded lake on top of a hill where there is no natural water, and creating altogether a new landscape. Some people may say that this will enhance the landscape. I disagree. Anyway, it certainly does not conserve it. In my view, the new road, the loss of hedgerow, the grandiose entrance, and all the associated landscaping does not conserve or enhance the AONB, but rather spoils and urbanises an area of protected landscape, as well as a charming rural lane. I have nearly finished. Ecology. So that was landscape and ecology, which I think I would give equal importance to. Ecology conclusions. It is the officer's view that the positives associated with this development would outweigh the impacts caused by the impact on priority habitats and conflict with policy ENV2. I disagree with this assessment. It really is central to this. As we know, policy ENV2 requires the development to demonstrate need benefit which outweighs the ecological harm. It also needs to demonstrate that there are no reasonable alternatives. There is no need for this scheme at all, and in my view, no benefit which can outweigh ecological harm. There is, of course, a reasonable alternative, which is not to build this road. Remarkably, as we've seen, the officer's report had already agreed with that, stating ecology conclusions in 719. The loss of priority habitat would conflict with the policy as the need for the loss has not been properly addressed. This weighs against the granting of planning permission. So how did this apparently firm conclusion become overturned in the officer's recommendation? The answer is given in the planning balance and conclusions. The impact on ecology is noted, and this application does fail to adhere fully to policy. The officer's words, does fail to adhere fully to policy. However, in favour of the development is the biodiversity net gain that would be provided on site. This conclusion hangs on the thinnest of threads, the BNG assessment, and I disagree that this tips the balance. It's not for me to question the entire principle of BNG, by which mature ecosystems can be destroyed on the promise of replacement elsewhere, because that is the system we have. My point is a very simple one. Biodiversity net gain is a necessary requirement for this, or indeed any application, but that does not make it a sufficient one. In essence, you need to show BNG just to play the game, but it is not a trump card. I do not believe that in planning terms, the BNG automatically overcomes the strong protections offered by ENV2. And in this case, it does not come anywhere near it. I have a brief point about the forestry officer who said, I will summarize very briefly. He said that this is in the report, the forestry officer said, from a arboricultural perspective, I have no objection to the proposed development. because he said that the hedgerows and trees requiring removal have been assessed as having low arboricultural quality. This is also called category C under the British standard, and it can mean several things, but it must include trees with no material conservation or other cultural value. So the forestry officer considers a beautiful historic hedgerow to have no conservation or cultural value. I do not know if this astonishing opinion carried any weight in the balance, but I hope not, as it should have been reported as category A, trees of high quality. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to ENV 2.4, which again was not in the officer's report. Development resulting in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats. ENV 4 is, so sorry, I do not have a note to myself about what that covers, but it says developments resulting in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodland or ancient and veteran trees, will be refused planning permission unless there are wholly exceptional reasons justifying the granting of planning permission. I claim that an ancient hedge is de facto composed of ancient trees and therefore falls under this absolute ban, quite irrespective of all the other points. My conclusion is that, in my view, this application is permanently damaging to the landscape, biodiversity and ecology of the Chilterns National Landscape and South Oxfordshire, both of which that we have a duty to protect. And I propose that the application is rejected.
Thank you.
Do we have to say?
Do we understand?
Yes.
We need to be more concise as to what the refusal conditions, refusal reasons are. And really that's just quoting the policies and saying that's what they are. So you believe it is against these policies. Yeah.
Yes, Chair, if you want my sort of advice in terms of the themes that we have there is one around obviously the impact of the works on the rural character of the local landscape, about urbanising the character of the area. So it's the impact, the cumulative impact of the various elements of this proposal. And this proposer of motion has also referred obviously to the loss of the priority habitat and there being insufficient justification for that, and that any benefits associated with the scheme in terms of biodiversity, the argued benefits, do not, in his opinion, outweigh the harms.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would be my sort of summary of the key themes coming out of the.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot there, James, and I'm trying to sort of.
I'm sorry for the length of that. What I should have said at the very end is this: I'm proposing that this conflicts with ENV 1, 2, and 4.
ENV 1, ENV 2, and ENV 4. And can you just paraphrase how it conflicts?
Yeah. So ENV 1 is landscape, character of the landscape. ENV 2 covers biodiversity on protected habitats, and ENV 4, I cannot remember what it's headed, and I didn't make a note to myself about what that's headed.
Was it came back and advise on?
Can we come back and advise on? Well, those are three schemes.
I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. That last one was ENV 2 brackets 4. I'm so sorry, not ENV 4. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I missed that.
It's primarily
So
on
it's
those.
ENV 2 brackets 3 and brackets.
Yes, I mean we need to. I think it's the advice of the officers to actually phrase it and word it, unless you want to advise that. But I think it's better from our point of view. I know that Mark has been toying with this and juggling it and trying to balance one against the other, and came down on one side. You've done the same thing and come down on the other side. Yeah, I do need a seconder. Councillor Gordon Creed is going to second it. Now, Councillor Norman has spoken at length. Do you wish to speak now or hold your peace until we've debated? You're going to reserve your right.
I'm going to reserve my right.
Right. Okay. So we will go into debate. Councillor Sadler.
You also mentioned trees of high quality as a material consideration. So yeah, trees and boundaries, and I think that would be considered as well. But
if you're trying to amend the proposal, then we need to more clarify what that is, unless of course we can accept that. But let's debate the merit of it along, please. Yeah.
So my comment was really about the biodiversity gain, from the lakes and the area at the top of the land, if you will. I raised the concern about the hedges, and Joe advised about the lifting of that hedge and moving it. And I think what's difficult here is that it is actually putting it in a completely different context now, because I think, Mark, you've already said, look, if we're going to do that, then it's a whole different thing. So I think that sort of puts a whole different spin on the whole issue to me.
Ben, do you want to speak?
Yeah, Jim, I've obviously come with an open mind this evening. Obviously, the proposer hasn't, which I think is a bit unfortunate. If I hadn't gone on the site visit, I would have probably voted against this. But having been on the site visit, I can't see the harm that it really makes. A lot has been made on the hedge. Henley Town Council have land at Gillet's Corner on Henley. The number of times the hedge has been layered there, and it just grows so big. It's amazing the speed that takes off again. So I think all this talk about, will it take 12 years, will it take 10, will it take 8, I think you'll find if it is replanted, it will grow fairly quickly. And I think that's why I asked the question, when was the hedge cut there before? And if it was 2 years, it's obviously grown a fair bit in 2 years. I think if we need to cherry pick, which obviously the proposer has done, if you look through the report, you've spoken items on ecology 2 and on 1 and 2, but if you go back to ecology, in the end it comes down in favour of approval. If you go to the forestry officer, that comes down to approval. If you go to the landscape architect, that comes down as the approval. The environmental protection team, they are in favour. There will be a policy from the new officer. The county council's in favour. There are so many, Natural England, they're in favour. And I shouldn't say this, but to be honest, if this gets refused, I think it'll be just a formality to take this to appeal and win quite easily, because of the officer's report in favour of this application. I'm sure there are numerous farms around here that have roads going through their farms, be it this one will be a new one, but then again, when these farms were built, they obviously had roads put through there. So who's to say that because we're 50 years, 60 years down a road, we can't put a new road through farmland? And from what we saw, I honestly can't say this is going to damage anything. In my view, it's only going to enhance what's there. And I think we've listened to professional speakers tonight, which adhere to basically what I'm saying. But I think just to cherry pick a few bits and pieces, and actually the policies mentioned, I think in the report, if you read the detail in the report, are in favour if you look at the policies that the proposers put forward. So I would suggest we really consider what we're proposing to do this evening. Otherwise, I think we could be making a dreadful mistake. And as I say, I would be more than happy to support the application. I definitely vote against.
Thank you, Councillor Arlott. Anybody else wish to speak? No, I'll go back to Councillor Gordon-Creed then, because she reserved her right.
So, whilst I really, really appreciate, and I could really hear the care and the thought and time and the heart that's gone into creating this application and the wish to enhance the landscape and to add. I really did hear that. I cannot support some of the elements within it, and specifically the harm to landscape is just against our ENV 1. It's against ENV 2 and 3 so thoroughly that I can't see the justification with regards to it's not about, you know, in this case, yes, there might be some roads through some farms already, but in this case, we're putting one in. That is not protecting the landscape. That is not doing what we say we are undertaking to do with regards to national landscapes. Although water generally always does add diversity, in this particular case, not there. It'll probably, you know, require taking the water table is so depleted at the moment anyway that dragging it up is going to impact the landscape in ways that you don't know, or we don't know. The other element with regards to plants and hedges grow fast. They do. That does not mean that they provide habitat when you take them up and put them in. They don't. I'm, you know, somebody who does surveys on natural landscapes every single week, and I see the impact of disturbing even the smallest amount of habitat that's been there a long time. The biometric in this case, to me, is genuinely on, as Councillor Norman said, the finest thin thread of essentially not. So as someone who is here to uphold the policies that we say we're here to uphold, I just cannot support this application. With regards to loss of hedgerow, with regards to a road going through the rural landscape that doesn't have one at the moment, and with regards to the fact that the policies categorically state that this harm shouldn't happen if there aren't alternatives, and in this case there really are. And so, you know, I don't want to take away their wish to advance to care for the future of this site, but I cannot support this application with those particular elements. It just is wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. So I go back now to the proposer for him to sum up briefly.
Very briefly, I just have one further comment, really. We've heard a lot about the replacement of the hedge by a hedge further in. I have a academic background in landscape history, and I have for 39 years been a nature conservationist. I manage a large group of woods, ancient wood in London, and I've been a farmer all my life and nature conservationist. And in my view, you cannot replace a hedge by moving it to somewhere else. That is a different hedge. And the history, I'm a student of great Oliver Rackham, and the historical siting of the hedge is where it is now. You cannot replace it somewhere else. That may seem a very fine point, but it's very important to some people. And we have heard that this hedge was previously the boundary of the previous Witheridge Hill Common. In summary, I would be I'm not sure how strongly to put this. I think it would be shameful of our council to approve this, and I recommend that it be refused.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to a vote, I just want some clarity on the reasons that were being put forward for refusal.
Yes, Chair. Having heard what the proposer and seconder of the motion have said, I think drawing back on those two key themes, impact upon the character and appearance of this unspoiled part of the Chilterns national landscape, and the loss of the priority habitat in the hedgerow, and that any benefits associated with the scheme don't, in the opinion of the two proposers, outweigh the harms that are caused. In terms of officer advice, we think the key policies to refer to are ENV 1 and 2, and actually DES 1 and 2. Mark will correct me if I'm wrong there, but we think those are probably the ones that are of most direct relevance to the issues that the speakers have raised this evening.
Okay, all right. So are we clear on that again? So it was.
Yeah. So in summary, about the harm or failure to conserve and enhance this part of the children's national landscape, and the loss of the priority habitat, i.e. the hedgerow, are the two key themes.
Those two.
To the reasons for
two
refusal.
reasons. Yeah. Okay. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion to refuse the application, will you please show? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. Those against is 2. So that is carried.
Applications
Okay. All right. I think we probably need to expand on the reasoning. The office is down to them to expand on the reasoning as to why, because it's quite complex. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It's taken a little while. I've just taken the whole thing's taken a little while. I propose a 5-minute break.
For those online, we're taking a very brief comfort break.
I'll roll back. Yeah,
Thank you, Chair. We're now live again.
we'll carry on with back live. Right, okay, we'll carry on with P23 S4003. 10A Wayside Green Woodcote, and a planning officer is Victoria Clark. So welcome, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is located within Woodcote Village at the end of the cul-de-sac and comprises part of the house of 10 Wayside Green and its residential garden to the side, which wraps around the end of the cul-de-sac. The site lies within the Chilterns National Landscape. Planning permission was granted in November 2020 for the erection of a dwelling adjacent to 10 Wayside Green. The development has been commenced. The application before you seeks to vary the approved plans to allow the relocation of the access and parking area that will serve the permitted dwelling. The proposed parking area and its access was previously approved in the front garden located at the end of the cul-de-sac, but is now to be located closer to the approved house. The application is referred to Planning Committee because the recommendation made by officers to grant planning permission conflicts with the view of Woodcote Parish Council. One of the objections of the parish relates to the siting of a static caravan on the site in the position of the previously approved parking area. The caravan is sited lawfully, and it should be noted that it does not relate to the current planning application and should not form part of the consideration of this planning application. The local highway authority has no objection to the proposal for the revised parking area. An appropriate amount of parking is proposed to serve the dwelling, and the spaces meet the County Council parking standards. The proposed parking area would be set away from neighbouring properties and would not harm the amenities of occupiers of neighbouring properties. And in contrast to the approved scheme, the proposed area would allow for boundary planting along the frontage of the site at the head of the cul-de-sac, which officers consider would be beneficial. Officers therefore recommend the application for approval with the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay, now Woodcote Parish Council, I'm sure we've all seen the email, haven't we? About the clash with the Parish Council meeting tonight. And I got some sympathy with that because that's why I wasn't here at the last planning meeting, because it clashed with the Town Council meeting. And that was important because that was approving their neighbourhood plan. But they put down their reasons for objection seem to be, sorry, I'll read it. In itself, the application may be seen as a minor amendment to the original by some who view it, but it is a cumulative effect on the area and the effect on the surrounding neighbours of each individual application, which is having a detriment effect on a quiet enjoyment of the neighbour's property. They seem to be stressing on the cumulative effect, which I think we're all aware is not relevant. Yeah. So that's the view of Woodcote Parish Council. Okay, I have one objector registered. This is Sarah McGurk. I see her there on screen. Mrs. McGurk, are you there? Do you hear us?
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Good.
I am here.
I can hear you. We can't see you, but
Okay. I'll put my camera on. Hello.
yes,
Hi.
thank you. It's better. Yeah. Okay. So you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you very much. I'm Sarah McGurk. I'm a neighbour of 10 Wayside Green, directly adjoining the plot to its southern boundary. I feel we have no other option but to object to this application due to the integral part this will play to the future permanent overdevelopment of this plot and to the area of the village. The plot has been subject of many planning applications. In place currently is the original 4-bedroom house. There's a planning application and agreement for a 4-bedroom new house, which I'll refer to as 10A Wayside Green. And there's now a licence for a very substantial 3-bedroom mobile home, which does not have any separate address. The integral part of this will play into move the approved parking area for 10A Wayside Green away from the area, which is now the site of the mobile home, which is being built on site under a licence. However, this same area also forms the approved parking area for 10A Wayside Green under application P19 S4288, and the application these variations of conditions apply to. So permanent development on the same area has already been considered and dismissed at appeal. The appeal decision for 10 Wayside Green was issued in July 2020 in respect of P19 S2307. This appeal sought to overturn the SODC's decision to refuse an application for the erection of a 2-bedroom house and a 3-bedroom house with landscape garden in the garden of 10 Wayside Green. In their consideration, the inspector noted that house 2 would be smaller, 2-bedroom dwelling and would be located to the south of the existing cul-de-sac, with a new access to be taken directly from the end of the cul-de-sac. Is this same location that the parking for 10A Wayside Green is approved for, and this current application seeks to vary, due to the building of a mobile home in the same location. It was noted in the appeal that the proposal would result in a pattern of development which is not in keeping with surrounding plots in the locality. The proposal would therefore result in overdevelopment to this part of the cul-de-sac and be a design which harms the character and appearance of the wider street scene. Additionally noted, whilst the cul-de-sac is residential in appearance, the appeal proposal would introduce considerable built form into a verdant, expansive part of this streetscape. I've found that the appeal proposal would harm the character and appearance of the area. I cannot stress enough how much this mobile phone has affected the previous green aspect of the street, and particularly the outlet of all the living space of our family's house and garden, most particularly due to the intrusion from noisy construction and that construction being carried out in evenings and weekends. I'm just going to put on my screen, if you don't mind me sharing, some photos taken from our garden and from the back of our house relating to this mobile home. This is it being, if you don't mind. I don't know if it's going to work. Hold on. No, it's not going to let me do it. I'm so sorry. But the mobile home is almost 13 meters in length and 6 meters in depth. The house, which had been declined and denied the application, was going to be 8 meters in frontage facing the street and approximately 10 meters in length. However, whereas our permanent building would have been subject to building control and would be a minimum distance from the boundary, the mobile version is within an arm's length of our fence and is being constructed at all hours. By permitting to vary these conditions, this allows scope for a further application for the same twin caravan unit or a more permanent structure or dwelling. Obviously, this would be vehemently objected to by the parish council and many neighbours who raised objections to the licence for the mobile home. But the removal of these conditions and the relocation of the parking would set the way for the caravan to remain in its current location. It's also significant to note that it's stated in the officer's report for the lawful development certificate for the proposed mobile home that if planning permission for 10A Wayside Green were to be implemented, then the twin unit caravan, the subject of the application of the LDP, which was granted, would not be lawful. Therefore, the location of the caravan would then ultimately have to be relocated in the event that the planning application were to be exercised by the current occupier. I'm very sorry, I can't seem to share my screen for some reason. I don't know if your permissions are not letting it happen. But
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. So in summary, the aspect of the street has very much been affected by the implementation by the owner of building a mobile home on the site, which had been rejected previously for a site of a 2-bedroom bungalow on the same location. And the relocation of the parking has enabled him to do that ultimately, and demolish the garden that would otherwise have been available.
Thank you, Mrs. McGurk. That is your time up. Thank you. Right, committee, any questions? I see now, so thank you very much. You are aware that we are here to discuss the car parking. We are not here to discuss the mobile home. Right.
Correct, but the location of the car parking does enable the mobile home to be located where it currently is.
We are here to discuss the car parking. Okay, thank you, Mrs. McGurk. Thank you. Right, so next, we have no other speakers. Ward councillor is Councillor Norman. You wish to speak as ward councillor or?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. And Joe's disappeared, so we'll just press on. We'll go back to Victoria if we've got any questions for Victoria. Yes, Councillor Arlott.
I think we need a little bit of clarification here, Chairman, if you go to page 70. What exactly are we talking about?
I think that's, yeah. Page 70 is a hand-drawn scheme.
So in terms of what's proposed, the drop curb will be inserted in the part where the cars are shown on the scope. That's where the parking is proposed. You can see the area marked garden is where it previously was, as shown on the.
I've got a suggestion, Victoria. Yeah. If we can get Tom to show the plan that is attached as page 70 to the agenda page, is that
page 71 is the approved one, and page 70 is the proposed one.
Thank you, Tom. If you can just keep going, that's obviously the location plan up first. Oh, yeah, that's
next one. Next one. It's 71. That's the one that's approved.
This is the approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
The drop curbs span the whole width, the top of the cul-de-sac. It's now currently proposed. It's coming off the corner. Will be positioned in front of the house.
I know it's not part of the application, Chairman, but how does the mobile home come into this? Does it affect the car parking?
It doesn't, as far as we're concerned, it does not. Mobile homes, as we discovered in the past, are an animal unto themselves. Yeah. The rules, regulations of mobile homes are weird.
But the caravan, someone mentioned a caravan as well. You wouldn't need planning permission for that either, would you?
If it's a mobile caravan, no.
Yeah.
For mobile homes, you do need permission, but it's not planning permission. Yeah. So it's a red herring really in there.
Well, can I just ask with regards to the withdrawal of permitted development condition, because I'm also very confused about. I mean, I understand we're here to deal with car park and not static caravan, but how would the withdrawal of permitted development apply going forwards with regards to any of that?
So that relates to outbuildings and extensions to the proposed swap, the approved house. They wouldn't be able to erect anything under permitted development. They would have to seek planning permission, but unfortunately that doesn't relate to caravans, which are covered under separate legislation.
Okay, so they could, in theory, they would apply a separate application to build something permanent where the caravan is or not, but that would not come under the withdrawal of permitted development, which just applies to the existing house.
So they could apply if they wanted to build a garage or something. They would have to apply for planning permission, and we would consider it on its own merits at that point.
Yeah, I think under permitted development they could stick a 3-metre extension on under permitted development, but because it's been withdrawn, they can't. Yeah, that's the whole lesson.
That only applies to the current building.
So if they want to extend that current building, the one they got permission for, then they would have to apply for planning permission to do it. They couldn't actually say permitted development allows me to do it. Councillor Norman.
Could I just ask on the existing planning, just where there are 4 little boxes, are they a garage? So that's the that one. What are those 4 boxes?
They are the parking spaces.
They're parking spaces. It's not a building.
No.
It was parking spaces. Okay, thank you.
I remember this coming through in a quite strange way to park, but they want to change it, and so I think the mobile home is a red herring. It's a.
Can you and sorry, that is a subsidiary question. Can you confirm the mobile home is not relevant to this application?
It's not relevant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's no further questions.
Well, that's one more question. Looking at the parking layout in front of us here, it's only on the plan, the sketch. Does it work?
Yes, and highways have been consulted and they've got no objections. So yeah, there is space for turning on the driveway.
And I've said with the other objections I would come, they're talking about community, I can't say it. Community. It's effect of the development, so we know that's not right. There's no objections. Real ones. Mrs. McGurk lives on the bottom of this.
If we get the site location plan up, please, Tom, then we can identify where the speaker.
There, yeah, the speaker lives. What's it called?
It's showing on this plan as Cedar House, but it's actually been renamed as
Yeah. And she's how far away? The
The
house is how far
I think
away?
the house is about 31 metres from the boundary of the application.
30 minutes from the boundary. Yeah.
Which would be the edge of the proposed parking area.
Okay, committee. Looking for a proposal. Councillor Norman.
Could we, I propose that we approve the application.
Okay, thank you. That's seconded. Seconded by Councillor Arlott. Anybody wish to speak on it and talk about it? No? Just else, Councillor Norman.
I think it's a fairly open and shut case, if I may say, put it like that.
We all agree with that. Yeah. Okay, all those in favour of the proposal, please show. Apart from Councillor Sadler. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 6. Against? One against, yeah. Okay, we'll move on to B23 S4003. Cedarwood, Eldon Road. I'm guessing that Eldon Road, Goring, and the planning officer is Andy Heron. You've been waiting patiently back there.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could you like to take us through this application, then, please?
Yeah, the officer recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions listed in Appendix 1. The application is referred to committee following an objection from Goring Parish Council with concerns that the development would impact the views of the national landscape area and would cause highway safety concerns. The site is located in a large plot which is within the Chilterns National Landscape and consists of a small 2-bed dwelling situated on a ridge, the northeastern fringe of Goring. Neighbouring dwellings are located to the east, south and west. An open countryside is situated to the north. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a replacement 4-bedroom detached dwelling. The dwelling will be designed with a hip roof with gables to the front and rear. The existing vehicle access onto Elvenden Road will remain with 4 on-site car parking spaces. The dwelling will be constructed of brick and natural slate to fit in with the character of the surrounding rural area. Now, this application follows an application which was refused last year by a delegated authority due to the height, mass and bulk of the proposed replacement dwelling and the impact it would have on the Chilterns National Landscape. There's also concerns with regards to insufficient tree information. This current application has submitted the required tree information and reduced the height, mass and bulk of the proposed dwelling and proposes to use materials which are more in keeping with the surrounding area than the existing. The elevation plans helpfully indicate the outline of the previous refused development, and the applicant has also helpfully submitted an elevation plan to show the existing dwelling compared to the proposed replacement dwelling. It also equates to a volume increase in the existing of 69.87%. The proposed dwelling will still have a large mass, however, it will not be untypical to adjacent properties, particularly those to the west, which are larger and more dominant than the proposed dwelling. The landscape officer has been consulted and has raised no objection, commenting that the materials and design of the existing dwelling make it appear prominent and visible from the road and footpath to the east. Unlike the existing materials, the proposed materials will look more muted and in keeping with the adjacent properties. Although larger in size, the landscape officer has advised that the replacement dwelling will have a neutral impact on the surrounding landscape. Just let you know that amended plans have been received following concerns from residents, the parish council, and originally the highways officer with regards to a new vehicle access that was proposed. The amended plans were submitted to remove the access. So the existing access will remain. Once they reconsulted, the highway officer raised no objections supporting the scheme. So you may have seen some of the photos that were on the site. It gives you an indication of how it will look. This from the rear, noting the materials present. There's also an image from the footpath to the east. And then finally, this is quite helpful, looking further down the footpath from the national landscape area and open countryside towards the development there. And probably worth noting just the materials that the existing materials. And that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I have one speaker, Mr. Kyle Seeley. Would you like to come to the table, and you will have 5 minutes for when you start speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. Following the previous decision relating to this site, we've worked with officers to revise the proposal so that the earlier concerns have all been addressed, allowing a positive recommendation accordingly. As well as retaining the existing access arrangement, which highways are satisfied with and addresses a previous concern, we've reduced the scale and mass of the replacement dwelling so that it steps down from the size of the larger dwelling to the west and the elevated property to the south. The property making it highly visible then uses the local vernacular, which the existing property most definitely does not. The colour alone makes it highly visible from the countryside to the north, as noted by your landscape officer. Indeed, they are supportive of the proposal, noting that the materials along with the design are improved and the acceptable relationship achieved. When combined with the proposed landscape scheme, the proposal will have a positive benefit upon the site, whilst also achieving a dwelling that is significantly more sustainable than the existing one, being one of the reasons for the application. As the existing dwelling damages heat in the colder months whilst being uncomfortably hot during the hotter periods, it will also meet all of the pertinent tests in respect to the CO2 generation and water usage, leading to a general improvement below. As all of the potential concerns have been addressed, it is trusted you will support the recommendation for you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, have we got any questions on this this evening? See, no.
Yes.
Just
Sorry,
one question.
Councillor Gordon Creed.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Is there an external lighting plan with regards to dark sky policy? Is there an external lighting plan been submitted or any plans for any?
Not as yet. There are some conditions relating to lights because of some of the batteries that go over, but that's part of one of the conditions.
Okay.
See no other questions, so thank you for your patience. Right, the ward councillor is Maggie Philippa Rivers, and she's made no comment and she's not here. So we'll go back to Mr. Heron, if anyone's got any questions for the planning officer. Councillor Arlott.
Yeah, Andy, on page 80, and this seems to be from, obviously it's been drawing parish council. It's got, they object the development would impact the views of the national landscape area and we will create highway safety implications. If the original house is higher, how could it affect the national landscape? And it looks like it's a bit of a cul-de-sac around there, so there's already a house there, so how could it affect the highway safety?
Yeah, so I think originally they proposed a new access for highway safety. And in response to that, the applicants decided to remove that proposed access and keep with the original. There's no changes to the access. In terms of the, their impact on the national landscape, you're right, it is on a ridge. They were concerned I assume, from the response to the open countryside to the north. So with that, we consulted our landscape officer for the professional input, and they, as I say, they supported the proposed development because although it is larger, they feel materials are actually more in keeping with the surrounding character of the rural landscape.
I just think, Chairman, I know we haven't got a proposal or seconder for approval or refusal yet, but they do seem to me two fairly lame reasons to bring this to committee.
Yeah, do tend to agree, and of course they're not here to defend that. So yeah, one of them, as to be fair, has been taken over by amendments to the plan. So what the parking one, traffic one, doesn't exist any further. Well, you can't object to it because it exists access. It might be a problem, but it's an existing access you can't object to. So if we've done with the questions for Andy, we're looking for a proposal. Councillor Gordon Green.
I propose we accept officer recommendation.
Officer recommendation, is that seconded? Councillor Norman seconded. Do we need any debate? Is there any debate? Do you wish to speak further? No. Okay, we'll go for a vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for a very pleasant evening.
Birdie, please can we end the broadcast?